My parents sued me claiming I stole money from the family. The truth? My sister spent 180,000 Brazilian reals in 1 year, and they wanted me to pay for it. When I was 16 years old, I made a silent promise to myself. I would never depend on anyone to save me. Not my parents, not my teachers, not some magical opportunity that might fall into my lap. Just me. That promise shaped every decision I made after that, even though nobody around me noticed or cared at the time, especially not my parents. If you ask them back then, I was just the quiet one, the girl who always had her head buried in books and online tutorials, the one who didn't understand how the world works. Meanwhile, my older sister, Vanessa, walked around as if she'd been born wearing a crown. Each of her birthdays felt like a coronation. Every dinner was a performance of her supposed brilliance. And my parents, they applauded the loudest of all. My name is Marina. I'm 26 years old now. But this story begins a few years ago, when I was turning 22. By that time, I had already paid off my student loans, yes, all of them. I had bought my first apartment in cash, nothing extravagant, just a small place in a developing neighborhood. And I had transformed my graphic design and digital consulting business into something I could be proud of, a 6-figure annual income, some freelancers working with me, and the kind of freedom most people my age only dreamed of. I wasn't ostentatious. I didn't post about it. I just kept my head down and worked. Because I knew, deep down, that if I stopped to celebrate, someone would try to take it from me. And it turns out I was right. Growing up in a small interior town, everyone knew everyone's business, especially when you had a surname like ours. My father, Roberto, was a sales manager at a car dealership. He wore his title like a badge of honor. My mother, Sandra, floated between part-time jobs and being a full-time supporter of Vanessa's ambitions. Vanessa, 3 years older than me, was always the golden child. My parents used to joke that Vanessa came out of the womb with a winning smile and a dream job offer. It didn't matter that she'd been fired from 3 jobs, crashed her car twice, or once maxed out my mother's credit card on a trip to Cancun she wasn't even supposed to take. Every time, my parents found a way to brush it off. She's just finding herself, they'd say. She's destined for great things. And me? I was Plan B, the invisible sister. I still remember a Christmas dinner, not long before everything went to hell. We were sitting at my parents' house, the turkey half-eaten, my mother already on her second glass of wine. Vanessa had just returned from trying to work as an influencer in Sao Paulo, something that ended, predictably, with her sleeping on a friend's couch and begging to come home. My parents welcomed her back like she was a war hero. At dinner, my father raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said, looking directly at Vanessa. "We know your next chapter is going to be great." Vanessa smiled and toasted. I said nothing. Nobody toasted when I bought my apartment. Nobody even mentioned it. They knew. I had told them months before. Sent photos. Offered to have them over. Never got a response. But Vanessa comes back with 2 suitcases and debt collectors on her tail, and suddenly she's the phoenix rising from the ashes? I tried not to let it affect me. I really tried. I had spent years building my business, learning digital marketing, branding, customer service. Every sleepless night, every missed party, every small victory I celebrated alone in my apartment. I thought that maybe, just maybe, this would finally be enough to earn a little respect. But I should have known better. In our house, effort didn't matter. Results didn't matter. What mattered was image, charm, drama. And Vanessa had all of that in spades. A week after that Christmas, my mother called me. Her tone was strange. Tense. Rehearsed. She asked if I could come over to talk. I assumed it had something to do with Vanessa. Maybe they wanted me to help her find a job, or pretend to be a reference. I was used to being the silent fixer, the ghost behind the curtain. But when I arrived, I knew something was wrong. My father was sitting in his armchair, arms crossed, TV on mute. Vanessa was on the couch, wearing a hoodie and looking smug, as if she was in on some inside joke. My mother had that nervous smile she always wore when she was about to say something she knew would annoy me. She pointed to the kitchen table. "Why don't we sit down?" I remember how I moved slowly, how the air felt heavy, as if something was about to change. I sat. My mother took a deep breath. Then she said it. We were hoping you could help Vanessa with a small investment. That word hung in the air like a bad smell. Investment. As if I were some angel investor they could charm into saving their sinking ship. I blinked. What kind of investment? Vanessa leaned forward. I have this idea. It's like a personal style consulting service, but online. Like those fashion apps. We could market to women 25 to 40. Low operating costs. High margins. I looked at her. Then at my parents. And you want me to finance this? My father cleared his throat. Not finance exactly. Just help her get started. You've had a good run, Marina. You've done well. It's time to give back. Give back. As if I had received something for free. As if my 3 a.m. client emails, my 14-hour workdays, my ramen-fueled dedication through college meant nothing because I hadn't done it the right way. I'm sorry, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice calm. But I'm not in a position to just throw money at a vague idea without a business plan. Vanessa rolled her eyes. It's not vague. I have contacts. I know people. You've been back here for 2 weeks, I said, living in the guest room. That was a mistake. I saw my mother's face harden, the way my father leaned forward. My mother placed her hand on the table. Marina, we're just asking you to help your sister. Family supports each other. I've supported myself since I was 18, I said, standing up. That's how I was taught, right? They didn't respond. And I left. I thought that would be the end of it. I imagined they'd guilt-trip me, maybe send some passive-aggressive messages, and then move on. That's how it had always been. But I didn't know how desperate things were about to get. I didn't know how far my parents were willing to go to protect their golden child. Because the next time I saw them, it was in court. But that's jumping ahead. There's more to tell. Much more. The silent war that started with a favor and turned into a full legal ambush. The betrayal. The lies. The moment I realized my own parents were willing to destroy me, just to prop up the daughter who had never lifted a finger. And how I decided, finally, to stop turning the other cheek. They didn't knock on the door. It was a Tuesday night, and I remember that clearly because it was client meeting day. The least glamorous part of my business, but the most essential. Every week I reviewed contracts, closed proposals, adjusted deadlines. That night, I was in the middle of a video conference when I heard the sound of my front door opening. At first, I thought I was imagining things. I lived alone. Nobody had a spare key. Then I heard the unmistakable click of the lock sliding back, and the low murmur of voices. 3, maybe 4. And one of them was Vanessa. I quickly hung up the call and went to the entrance, heart racing. What the hell? My parents were in my entryway. Vanessa was behind them, smiling as if she owned the place. And my father? He had a manila folder under his arm, and that look of moral superiority he used to wear whenever he lectured me about attitude when I was a kid. My mother gave me a tight-lipped smile, as if this were a casual family visit, not an invasion. How did you get in? I asked, stunned. We used the key, my mother said. As if it were nothing. As if the emergency key I had given them years ago, when I still thought we had something resembling a healthy relationship, was an open invitation to invade without warning. I extended my hand. Give it back. No. She hesitated, then took the key from her purse and dropped it into my palm like a child caught stealing. But it wasn't just that. It was the look in her eyes. She wasn't ashamed. She was disappointed. In me. What are you doing here? I asked, more tired than angry. Vanessa shrugged, walking into the living room as if she owned it. We tried to be polite. You slammed the door in our face. So now we're handling things the appropriate way. The appropriate way? I repeated, narrowing my eyes. My father placed the folder on my kitchen counter and pushed it in my direction. It's time we had a serious conversation, Marina. About what you owe this family. I didn't open the folder. Not yet. I was too busy trying to figure out if I was dreaming. You're in my house. Without permission. You have 5 seconds to explain why I shouldn't call the police. Oh, please, my mother said, as if I were being dramatic. You're acting like we're strangers. I wonder why, I replied dryly. Just read the paperwork, my father said, gesturing to the folder. I opened it. At first, it didn't register. Legal language. Names. Numbers. A lawsuit filed. Their names against me. Then the words hit me like a slap. Fraudulent retention of assets. Misappropriation of family investment. Unjust enrichment at the expense of sister. I stared at the page. What the hell is this? My voice cracked, high and loud in the silence of my apartment. Vanessa took a step forward, arms crossed. It's what you get when you lie about where the money came from. I didn't lie about anything. Oh, come on, she said, rolling her eyes. We all know you didn't build that business from scratch. You used the money Grandma left, didn't you? My jaw dropped. Are you serious right now? She smiled like a cat that had just cornered a mouse. You think I didn't notice how you suddenly got super comfortable with digital design the year Grandma died? That's when your little business took off. Admit it. I didn't receive a penny from Grandma's inheritance, I said, stunned. She left everything to Grandpa. She made that clear. Yeah, and she always had a soft spot for you, my mother said calmly. Even when Vanessa was the one who needed help. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. You invade my home, throw false accusations at me, and what? You want me to admit to stealing money I never touched. We want what's fair, my father said firmly. Vanessa has been struggling. You've clearly profited. It's time to rebalance the scales. There it was. The mask had dropped. I expected manipulation, maybe guilt trips. But this? A lawsuit? Against their own daughter? Something in me cracked. Years of being overlooked, belittled, treated like a background character in Vanessa's story, all of it boiled over at once. You want to rebalance the scales? I said, voice shaking. Let's talk about scales. Let's talk about the 2 cars you bought her before she turned 20. The way you co-signed her loans, paid off her credit cards, and let her come home every time she failed. You gave her everything. And me? I never asked you for a single penny. Because you were always too proud, my mother shot back. Because I had to be. I shouted. You never offered. You never believed in me. You never even asked what I was building. And now that it worked, you think I owe you. There was silence for a moment. Then Vanessa muttered, you wouldn't even have a future if it weren't for this family. My fists clenched. You mean the family that's suing me? My father stepped forward. You can avoid all of this. If you just help your sister get on her feet, we can drop the suit. Start fresh. You mean hand over my money so you won't drag my name through the mud? He didn't respond. I grabbed the folder and threw it back. Get out. Now. My mother looked like she wanted to argue. My father looked like he wanted to punch a wall. Vanessa said nothing. She just turned and left with that smug swagger that said she thought she'd won. But they hadn't won. They had lit the fuse. In the days that followed, the fallout began to arrive. A letter from their lawyer came first, confirming they were moving forward with the suit. Then came the calls from distant relatives. Uncles, cousins, even old neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly wanting to say hi after hearing some things. The rumor mill was spinning fast, and it all painted me as the villain. I tried to stay focused. My business was still running, contracts still coming in. But I couldn't ignore the way everything felt. Poisoned. Every email notification felt like it could be a subpoena. Every family message felt like a trap. I stopped sleeping. Started checking my front door 3 times a night. And then, 3 weeks after the invasion, I got the email that made it all real. It was from my bank. One of my business accounts, frozen. Pending investigation linked to a legal dispute. My heart stopped. I clicked, fingers trembling. I hadn't done anything wrong. Paid all my taxes. Kept clean records. But now, thanks to their baseless allegations, I was being treated like a criminal. I called the bank. They were polite but firm. The freeze would remain until the suit was resolved in court. Vanessa had said she'd make things fair. She was dragging me through the mud, and my parents were handing her the rope. I thought that would be the worst. But then I discovered something that chilled my blood. Vanessa hadn't just filed a lawsuit. She had applied for a restraining order. Against me. Claiming I had threatened her. Claimed I was erratic, hostile, and a threat to her safety. I stared at the copy in disbelief. The timing was no coincidence. She was trying to portray me as unstable, so the court would believe her story, not mine. It was character assassination, pure and simple. A smear campaign built on lies and funded by the same people who used to tuck me in at night. That was the breaking point. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't even about the lawsuit. It was about principles. About standing up to people who used love as a leash and expected me to bow down and thank them for it. I wasn't going to settle. I wasn't going to apologize. And I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story of my life. They wanted a war. Fine. I'd give them one. And the first shot would be fired at the one secret they thought I didn't know. The financial skeleton in their closet. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning in early fall. The sun was bright, but I barely noticed. I hadn't slept the night before. I was too wired. Too angry. Too focused on every worst-case scenario running on loop in my head. My lawyer, a woman named Dr. Patricia, who I found through a client referral, assured me the case was weak. "This won't go anywhere," she said. "Judges can smell fabricated drama from miles away." Still, I was shaking when I walked into the courthouse. I wasn't afraid of losing the restraining order case. I was afraid of what it meant. That Vanessa was willing to go this far. That my parents were willing to swear under oath that I was violent, unstable, and a threat to my own sister. That they were coaching her on what to say. I knew it in my gut. Their names weren't on the document, but their fingerprints were all over it. That morning, they all showed up. Vanessa walked in wearing a blazer that didn't fit her, acting like she was the victim of some mafia vendetta. My parents sat behind her like her personal support team, mother dabbing fake tears, father glaring at me as if I'd ruined the family name. When the judge dismissed the case 20 minutes later, citing insufficient evidence and clear motive of financial retaliation, they acted shocked. Vanessa even tried to speak up again after the gavel came down, as if she thought she could convince the judge to change her mind. But it was over. At least that part. I didn't feel relief. I felt empty. Because even though I had technically won, I knew this wasn't over. The restraining order wasn't the real attack. It was just a distraction. A character strike designed to weaken me before the lawsuit began. And it worked. Not in court, but in my head. I went home that day, sat on the floor of my living room, and stared at the sealed boxes of unshipped products stacked against the wall. For the first time in years, I didn't want to work. Didn't want to fight. I just sat there in silence, feeling like I'd lost something I couldn't name. The following month, everything stagnated. My business accounts remained partially frozen. I moved some operations to a backup account, but the damage was done. My cash flow took a hit, my ad budget dried up, and my delivery timeline slowed down. Clients noticed. Some dropped out. One of my best suppliers abandoned me, citing reputational risk. I tried to explain, tried to fight it. But the more I pushed, the more I felt like I was drowning in mud someone else had poured over me. I was losing my balance, not just financially, but mentally. And then came the worst blow of all. It was a Thursday afternoon when I got the call. My landlord for the space I rented for storage, only 80 square meters, but it had become the beating heart of my operation, told me he wasn't going to renew my contract. "Too much legal noise," he said. "I have other tenants. Can't afford to have drama." I begged. Offered to pay 3 months in advance. He didn't budge. I hung up and stared at the wall. That was the moment. Rock bottom. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just silent. Cold. Like something inside me finally let go and floated away. I had spent 4 years building something that worked. Something honest. Something mine. And in less than 2 months, the people who raised me had almost destroyed it all. I could have given up. Thought about it. Even started drafting a letter to the court agreeing to settle. Something low. Just enough to make them go away. But I didn't send it. Because that night, I got a message from someone I hadn't heard from in over a decade. Her name was Julia. She used to be my neighbor when we were kids. We played tag in the backyard, rode bikes down the street. We lost touch after she moved in elementary school. I hadn't thought about her in years. But there she was, messaging me on LinkedIn of all places. "Hi Marina," she wrote. "I saw your name in a post from mutual acquaintances and was surprised. I remembered you from back then. I was sad to hear about the lawsuit. Just wanted to say, Don't let them take what you built. You were always the smart one, the quiet one. But we all knew. I read that message several times. Not because it fixed anything, but because it reminded me of who I used to be. The girl who stayed up late watching design tutorial videos. Who once sold custom notebooks door to door just for fun. The girl who created things, even when nobody paid attention. And suddenly I realized something. They couldn't take that from me. They could freeze accounts, spread lies, file lawsuits, but they couldn't touch the part of me that knew how to build. So that night I got up, went to the storage room, cleared my whiteboard, and started over from scratch. Rebuild, rebrand, restart. I started small. I had a few hundred reais in liquid cash, barely enough for a single round of Facebook ads. So instead, I went organic. Reddit, Instagram Reels, TikTok short videos. I rebranded my best-selling service under a different name, with a cleaner aesthetic and a more personal voice. I built a new website using a VPN and a new LLC registered in another state. I stayed up until 3 a.m. every night. Made calls. Wrote copy. Learned more about website optimization in 3 weeks than I had learned the previous year. And it started working. Slowly. Quietly. But it worked. My DMs filled up with clients asking where the old brand had gone and thanking me when I responded personally. One of them was a YouTuber who ended up featuring the service in a review. That review exploded. Orders tripled in a week. Meanwhile, the lawsuit stalled. My lawyer filed a motion to dismiss. Their team tried to amend it. The judge pushed hearings out another month. Then another. That gave me time. Time to recover. Time to prepare. Because while they were busy spinning fairy tales about how I had stolen the future Vanessa was supposedly meant to have, I was busy collecting receipts. Not just business receipts. Family receipts. The tax records I mentioned? They weren't easy to get, but they were real. My grandmother, before she passed away, had sent me a manila envelope herself, when she was still living alone. Inside were copies of the trust she set up after Grandpa died. And here's the kicker. Vanessa had received a payment. A big one. Enough to pay off her college loans, start a business, or buy a house. But she didn't do any of that. She spent it all. Gambling. Bars. Trips. Cryptocurrency schemes. All of it gone in less than a year. And she knew it. My parents knew it. But they never expected me to find out. I also found an old voicemail from Grandma. She left it a few weeks before she passed. Her voice was fragile, but clear. I hope you're well, Marina. Just wanted to say I'm proud of you. I wish the others saw what I see. Keep going. And remember, don't let them blame you for saving people who never tried to save themselves. I listened to that message on repeat the night I managed to transcribe it for evidence. Because now I had the motive. Now I had the proof. The tide was turning. But I didn't tell anyone. I stayed quiet. Kept building. I moved my entire operation to a friend's garage temporarily. She ran an organic products business and let me use her depot for shipments. I stayed invisible for a while. No posts. No updates. Not even to distant relatives. I let them think I was losing. Let them tell stories about how the truth was catching up to me. And all the while I was watching. Waiting. Preparing for the next phase. Because soon the court date would arrive. And when it did, I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to dismantle everything they had built. Not out of revenge, at least not entirely. But because some people only learn when you stop letting them write your story and hand them a copy of the real one. And trust me, I was writing every word. They didn't know I had the file. That was the most satisfying part. Grandma's inheritance documents. The ones I found tucked inside that envelope she sent me before she passed. They weren't just sentimental relics. They were a map. A timeline. A receipt. The kind of thing my parents presumed would never see the light of day. After all, Vanessa had burned through that money before the ink on the check dried. Who would remember? Who would care? Well, me. I scanned everything. Highlighted the key numbers. The trust. The disbursement details. The fact that Vanessa had received a payment of 180,000 Brazilian reals at age 23, under the condition it be used for long-term growth and development. My name? Nowhere. I hadn't received a penny. The best part? Grandma had written a handwritten note on the back of the final page. Just 6 words in her cursive handwriting. Marina doesn't need it. She builds. 6 words that destroyed the entire narrative my parents had built. 6 words that turned Vanessa's sob story into what it really was, a squandered inheritance, not a stolen one. A future she herself set on fire. But I didn't make it public. Not yet. The lawsuit was still dragging on. My parents' lawyer kept trying to push hearings, which was fine by me. Each week that passed gave me time to get stronger and gave them more rope to hang themselves with. While they stalled, I started digging. Not just through legal records or bank statements. Through people. See, there's something interesting about small towns. People talk. Especially when you're polite. Especially when you're quiet. I reached out to an old neighbor, Donna Carmum, who used to live across from our house when we were growing up. She remembered everything. The day Vanessa got the check. The brand new car that appeared in our garage a week later. The parties. The screaming fights between her and my father when the money ran out. She always said she'd waste it, Donna Carmum told me over tea. Your grandmother. She wasn't blind, you know. She just didn't want to hurt your mother. I didn't even have to ask for a statement. She offered one. Word spread. Soon I had a small file of messages, texts, even photos. Vanessa in Las Vegas. Champagne in hand. Vanessa on a yacht. Tagged in an old Instagram post from a college friend. Holding a bottle of imported vodka and making obscene gestures at the camera. The dates. All within the 12 months after Grandma's trust payout. It painted a picture. Loud. Undeniable. But that wasn't the only angle I was working. I had one more card to play. One that required some finesse. The first person I called was Mr. Mendez. He used to be our family's accountant. When my parents still filed their taxes properly. I hadn't seen him in years, but he remembered me instantly. Marina, you were the quiet one, right? The polite one. I need a favor, I said. I wasn't sure if he'd agree. But then I told him what was happening. About the lawsuit, the restraining order, the accusations. He got quiet. Really quiet. They told me you stole from them, he said after a moment. Said you were hiding something big. But I didn't buy it. Why not? Because I did their taxes the year they received that trust distribution. Sandra told me it was for Vanessa's future. Seed money for a tech company, she said. I reported it as a gift transfer, exactly as she asked. Would you be willing to put that in writing? I asked. A pause. I'll do you one better, he said. I still have the files. He sent them the next morning. Now I had proof from 3 directions. Grandma's trust documents, eyewitness testimony, and tax records showing Vanessa received money they never disclosed during discovery. My lawyer almost fell out of her chair when I handed her the file. They're screwed, Dr. Patricia said, flipping through the pages. This isn't just a defense anymore. This is countersuit material. I nodded. That's the plan. But I didn't just want to win. I wanted to change the narrative. So I started preparing something else. Something more public. I rebuilt my brand under a new name. Different domain, different visuals, everything different. But this time, I leaned into the story. Not the lawsuit itself, just the broad strokes. Built from scratch, I wrote on the About page. Bootstrapped. No handouts. Every reel earned through hard work. I never mentioned names. I didn't need to. People knew. Old clients came back. New ones followed. Word spread. Someone started a Reddit thread about the brand rebrand, and it caught fire. This is how you bounce back, one comment said. This woman's work ethic is unreal. My email list tripled. Revenue recovered. And I stayed quiet. Because I was still waiting for one more thing to fall into place. Vanessa's next move. It came sooner than expected. I got a call from Dr. Patricia one morning while I was packing orders. They filed an emergency motion, she said. For what? To freeze your personal assets. They're claiming you're hiding money. I should have been furious. Should have been panicking. Instead, I smiled. Let them try. See, while they were playing checkers, drunk on rage and entitlement, I was setting up the chessboard. Everything I owned was now protected under a new LLC. The house. transferred into a trust. The car, leased under the company. Even my savings were split between two accounts, both under separate holding companies. Dr. Patricia laughed when she saw the paperwork. "You've been busy." "They taught me well," I said. "Never trust anyone. Not even family." We contested the motion with everything. The tax records. The trust documents. The timeline. Donna Carmum's letter. Mr. Mendez's statement. A complete audit trail of my business growth. From the day I started selling custom designs in my dorm room to the day I bought my house. It was surgical. And devastating. But still, I wasn't done. Because here's the thing about people like Vanessa and my parents. They don't just want money. They want control. The power to shape the story. The ability to say you owe us and make everyone believe it. So I plan one final move. Something public. Something permanent. I scheduled a podcast interview. Just a small one, run by a fellow entrepreneur I met years ago. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't viral. But it was honest. For an hour, I told my story. Not the lawsuit. Not the revenge. The real story. I talked about growing up in the shadow of someone who could do no wrong. About building a business at night while the rest of my family laughed at me. About paying off student loans with side hustle money. About the power of being underestimated. Sometimes, I said, the hardest part isn't starting from nothing. It's starting from behind. When the people who should have supported you were the ones holding you back. The episode aired a week later. The response was overwhelming. DMs, emails. Comments from strangers saying they saw themselves in my words. People who had been diminished by their own families. People who had to fight for every inch. But more than that, people started asking questions. Questions about the lawsuit. Questions my parents weren't ready to answer. Their lawyer called Dr. Patricia in a panic. "We'd like to revisit settlement discussions," he said. "We're not interested," Dr. Patricia replied. Because it was too late now. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was dictating the terms. The next hearing was coming fast. And I was ready. Not just with evidence. Not just with allies. But with the unshakable truth that no matter how many times they tried to rewrite my story, I still held the pen. And soon, I would use it to end theirs. The courtroom was colder than I remembered. Not physically, no. It was that sterile, rigid kind of cold. The kind you feel in your spine when you know something irreversible is about to happen. The walls were beige. Fluorescent lighting. Nothing dramatic. No pulsing music. Just the hum of tension as everyone took their places. It had been 10 months since they first filed the lawsuit. 10 months since my parents and my golden sister Vanessa decided I owed them the life she had wasted. 10 months of poisonous texts, weaponized family gossip, and pathetic attempts to destroy everything I had built alone since I was 18. And now it was time. Their side looked shaken. Vanessa sat next to their lawyer in a suit she didn't know how to wear, chewing the inside of her cheek like she was trying to disappear into the seat. My parents were behind her, both dressed like they were going to a church charity tea. Mother in pearls and pastels, father stiff in a blazer that didn't fit right around his gut anymore. They refused to look at me. I was calm. Not because I wasn't nervous. I was. But it was a strange, quiet calm. The kind you only get when you've spent months preparing for a moment with surgical precision. There was nothing left to panic about. Everything had already been set in motion. My lawyer, Dr. Patricia, shuffled papers beside me. She leaned in and whispered, "This is going to be fun." The judge, a stern woman in her early 60s, called everyone to order. The hearing began with their lawyer laying out the same tired argument. That I had unfairly benefited from family resources. That I had deceived my parents into believing I was self-made. That Vanessa's life had been harmed because I hoarded financial assets that should have been shared. The words sounded so desperate, so empty. And then it was our turn. Dr. Patricia stood up. No theatrics. No shouting. Just facts. "Your Honor," she began, "we're going to demonstrate 3 things. First, that my client, Marina, received no financial support or inheritance from her family. Second, that the plaintiff's daughter, Vanessa, received a disbursement of 180,000 Brazilian reals from a family trust, which she spent irresponsibly. And third, that this lawsuit is a malicious attempt to extract funds from my client under false pretenses after the plaintiffs failed to control their own finances or those of their daughter. Then she dropped the folder. Hard. Exhibit A, Grandma's trust documents, clearly stating the money was for Vanessa and Vanessa only. My name was never mentioned. Exhibit B, the notarized letter from Mr. Mendez, their former accountant, confirming he filed that gift as a trust distribution with explicit instructions from my mother. Exhibit C, a timeline of Vanessa's social media posts, travel records, and online purchases. Everything from designer sneakers to bottle service in Miami, aligning perfectly with the 12 months following the trust payout. Exhibit D, a recorded voicemail from Grandma herself, authenticated and transcribed, in which she said, in no uncertain terms, Marina doesn't need it. She builds. The courtroom went still. My parents' lawyer tried to object. The judge overruled. The facts stood. Then came the final blow. Dr. Patricia pulled out the spreadsheet. Your Honor, we've also prepared a breakdown of my client's business growth over the past 5 years. Everything is verifiable, from her dorm room operation to the first product launch to Shopify sales records. Every rail, every invoice, every tax return. There's no missing money, no hidden assets. Just a young woman who worked hard and succeeded without help. She paused. Meanwhile, we have evidence that the plaintiffs and their daughter consistently misrepresented their financial situation to various parties, including their mortgage lender and this court. The judge raised an eyebrow. Dr. Patricia smiled. That's why we're also filing a countersuit for defamation, malicious prosecution, and emotional distress. I'll never forget what happened next. The judge leaned back in her chair, removed her glasses, and looked directly at my parents. I've presided over many family cases, she said, voice calm but cold. But this is one of the most cynical attempts I've ever seen to weaponize the legal system against a relative for personal gain. Based on the evidence presented, I'm dismissing all claims against Ms. Silva with prejudice. Boom. Done. But she wasn't finished. As for the countersuit, she continued, Ms. Silva is within her rights to pursue damages. And frankly, I believe she has a case. Their lawyer's face went pale. Vanessa just sat there, frozen, like a deer in headlights. My mother blinked rapidly, hands fidgeting with her wedding ring. My father's face turned red with something between rage and humiliation. But none of them said a word. Not one. We left in silence. Once we were in the hallway, Dr. Patricia turned to me. They'll settle. Trust me. They can't afford not to. And they did. 2 weeks later, their lawyer reached out with an offer. They'd cover all my legal fees, issue a written apology, drafted by us, and waive any rights to future legal action if I withdrew the countersuit. I didn't agree. Not yet. Because there was one more thing I needed. Truth. I made the apology public. Not buried in a private letter or hidden behind legal jargon. I made sure it was public as a formal statement on my business website, shared in an open letter on LinkedIn, and even featured on the same small podcast that had generated the first wave of support. The truth had to be visible. Not for revenge. For the record. I didn't want their money. I wanted accountability. The day the statement went live, I received over 300 emails. Strangers. Friends. Former classmates. Even some old teachers. All saying the same thing. Thank you for telling the truth. As for Vanessa, she'd disappeared from social media. Word spread that she had left town, maybe moved in with a cousin in another state. Her name became something whispered in our town. Not spoken with admiration, but with shame. And my parents, they lost most of their inner circle. The people they used to gossip with now crossed the street to avoid them. Donna Carmum said they stopped showing up at church completely. No more neighborhood barbecues. No more pretending. They didn't just lose the case. They lost the story. Because I took it back. In the months that followed, my business doubled in size, expanded into 2 new product lines, hired a small team, and launched a mentorship program for underprivileged students trying to start their own ventures. I called it the Builders Fund. I knew Grandma would have loved it. But the revenge didn't stop there. Not because I planned it, but because truth has a way of unfolding. 3 months after the trial, I got a call. It was from a journalist at a regional news portal. She had heard about the case through the podcast and wanted to do a story about female entrepreneurship and overcoming family adversity. At first, I hesitated. But then I realized this was the opportunity to make sure the story was told right. Not just for me, but for all the other women who had been underestimated, dismissed, or sabotaged by the people who were supposed to love them. The story was published 2 weeks later. It was extensive, detailed, fair, and it went viral. Suddenly, I wasn't just Marina, the graphic designer who built a business from scratch. I was Marina, the woman who refused to let her family rewrite her story, the woman who fought back when it would have been easier to give up. Offers started coming in. Invitations to speak at entrepreneurship conferences. Interviews on bigger podcasts. Even a publisher reached out asking if I'd consider writing a book. My business exploded. Not just in revenue, but in impact. Women from across the country wrote to me, sharing their own stories of toxic family dynamics and how they found the courage to get out. I created a community. A safe space. A place where people who felt invisible could be seen. And my parents, they watched it all happen from the shadows. I heard through the gossip network that they tried to reach out a few times. Unanswered calls. Unreturned emails. Once, my mother even showed up at my old storage address, but I had already moved. Part of me wondered if they really understood what they had done. If they ever truly reflected on how they almost destroyed their own daughter for the sake of another's failure. But I didn't lose sleep over it. Because I realized something crucial, I didn't need their forgiveness. I didn't need their recognition. I didn't need them to understand. I just needed them to leave me alone. And they did. After the dust settled, after the story spread, after it became clear I wasn't just the quiet daughter they could push around anymore, they backed off. Not out of kindness, not out of remorse, but out of pure, simple shame. 1 year after the trial, I received a letter. It was from my mother. Handwritten. 3 pages of tortured apologies and rationalizations. "We never meant to hurt you," she wrote. "We were just trying to help Vanessa. You were always so strong, so independent. We thought you'd be fine." I read it once, then put it in the shredder. Because some apologies come too late. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. And I was at peace with that. Dr. Patricia called me a few months later. "Did you hear?" "Hear what?" "Your sister is trying to launch another business. Something about online life coaching." I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. "Of course she is. Are you going to do anything about it?" "No," I said. "Let her try. The truth is already out there. People can decide for themselves." And they did. Vanessa's attempt to reinvent herself as a motivational coach lasted exactly 3 months before it imploded. Turns out people Google now. And what they found? The complete story. The lawsuit. The lies. Everything. She closed the accounts. Disappeared again. And this time I didn't even keep track. Because I had better things to do. My business continued to grow. I moved into a proper commercial space. Hired 6 more people. Launched an entirely new product line focused on empowering female entrepreneurs. I bought a bigger house. Not because I needed to impress anyone, but because I wanted to. Because I could. Because I deserved it. And for the first time in my life, I stopped looking back. I stopped wondering if my parents would ever understand. Stopped waiting for Vanessa to grow up. Stopped carrying the weight of their approval. I let go. 2 years after the trial, I sat in my office, looking out over the city through the window of my new commercial building. My team was downstairs, laughing as they closed another big contract. My phone buzzed with 2 more client inquiries. And for the first time, I really felt it. Peace. Not the fragile peace of someone still waiting for the other shoe to drop, but the solid, unshakable peace of someone who fought for every inch and won. My parents tried to define me by their absence, by their neglect, by their favoritism. But in the end, I defined myself. By my resilience. By my work. By my refusal to accept the narrative they wrote for me. One day, maybe I'll forgive them. But not today. Not tomorrow. And honestly, maybe never. Because forgiveness is something you earn. And they never tried. They thought they could take what I built. They didn't realize I am what I built. And nobody, not even family, can take that from me. Sitting there that Friday afternoon, with the setting sun painting the sky golden through the office window, I opened my laptop and started writing. Not a work email. Not a client proposal. But the first chapter of something bigger. My story. In my own words. For anyone else out there who is still fighting in someone's shadow, waiting for permission to shine, the title came easily, built, not given. And as I typed, smiling to myself, I realized something. They didn't just lose the case. They gave me the best story I could ever tell. And I was just getting started. If this story touched you in any way, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories of overcoming injustice. Your comments and support make all the difference for other people who might be going through similar situations. Until the next story.